Hello, this is Michael Eure, and I'd like to invite you to the Michael Eure Show, featuring student hosts and very special guests talking about a variety of interesting topics. You can find us on the Eagle Stream YouTube channel.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Michael Eure Show. Today we're going to be having a very interesting interactive discussion about the public historically Black colleges in North Carolina. And right now, what I'm going to ask everybody to do is briefly introduce themselves. And since I've said who I am, we're going to go with Jerry Green, and then I'll just call each person's name and just do a quick introduction. Jerry?
My name is Jerry Green. I'm a cybersecurity student here at Wake Tech. I've also been participating in virtual mixers alongside Michael Eure here.
Thank you. Dr. Tarik?
I am Dr. Latif Tarik, Assistant Professor of History at Elizabeth City State University in Elizabeth City, North Carolina.
Dr. Benson?
Hello, I'm Dr. Donna Benson, a Professor of History at Winston-Salem State. And in the past, I was the Interim Chancellor of North Carolina Central in 1992. And in 1995, I was the Interim Chancellor at Fayetteville State. So I'm very familiar with all of these wonderful, wonderful institutions. And I thank you for having me, and just welcome and greetings to all of our colleagues today.
Thank you. Dr. Tabor?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Robert Tabor. I'm an assistant professor at Fayetteville State. It's great to be here today.
Dr. Smallwood?
Dr. Arwin Smallwood. I'm the chair of the Department of History and Political Science here at North Carolina A&T State University. I'm glad to be here.
Dr. Johnson?
Assistant Professor of History and Director of the Public History Program at North Carolina Central University and Vice Chair of the Faculty Senate at North Carolina Central University.
Okay. Well, we're going to do something a little bit different. And if Sarah, I used to say, take us to the side. I don't know if it's going to be two sides or one side. And we're going to briefly just look at the websites for each school. And we're starting with Fayetteville State because it is the oldest school, and 1867. And we can go on to Elizabeth City. But for all the audience, we're going to put all of these websites in the chat, and you can go back and get information, learn more about those schools. And Elizabeth City State University is from 1891. And they were founded just a few days before the school that's going to follow them, which is North Carolina A&T State University, which was also founded in 1891. And they just opened, I think, the engineering building named after this man, who's the chancellor. Next, Winston-Salem State is the next. And Winston-Salem State was founded in 1892. And if I mess up any of these dates, y'all can correct me. And I'm just so excited to have all of these wonderful people here. And last and not least, we're going to do North Carolina Central University. And they were founded in 1910. So they are the baby of the bunch. And now we're going to go back and we're going to start asking questions. And Jerry, we're going to do them in order. They know Fayetteville State is first, Elizabeth City State is second, then A&T, then Winston-Salem State, and then North Carolina Central.
Right. All right, it's going to be pretty interesting because I went to school and graduated in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So can you give us a brief history about the founding of the university and some of the circumstances of their time in North Carolina?
For sure. One thing that makes Fayetteville State at least somewhat unique is Fayetteville had a robust, active, politically involved free Black community, even in the years before the Civil War. We think about Hiram Revels, the first African-American U.S. Senator, was born in Fayetteville. Henry Evans, Lewis Leary, who fought alongside John Brown, had Fayetteville ties. And so the community was already involved in trying to put together a school. And then when the Freedmen's Bureau came in with a little bit of financial assistance, really they met up with Black citizens in Fayetteville to establish what was then known as the Howard School in 1867, so that then that school was ready to become the first or one of the first normal schools for teacher education in North Carolina in 1877.
Dr. Tarik?
All right, so Elizabeth City State University was founded in 1891. It was founded based on Bill 383, which was the Hugh Cowell bill. The Hugh Cowell bill actually brought about 5 universities in existence, and that's why we see some of the dates of the university very close together. I'm looking at Hugh Cowell as an individual is pretty much just like Dr. Tabor just said about the individual at Fayetteville State. They were definitely Hugh Cowell himself was actually part of I would say, the North Carolina legislature, and that's where he began to advocate for normal schools in North Carolina. But he also was the president of Wesley Institute, which ended up becoming, I believe it was Livingstone College at the time. One of the challenges that they had would be Plessy versus Ferguson, and going past that, beginning to establish these independent Black schools is how the bill itself would come about. The Elizabeth City State Normal School had a principal by the name of P.W. Moore. P.W. Moore was the very first principal of the school, and we actually have the actual school on our campus now that we are turning into a museum.
Dr. Smallwood.
So North Carolina A&T, again, was founded by the Second Morrill Act, which was in 1890. And the purpose was to, of course, create land grant colleges in the South. And so A&T was one of the schools that was created here in North Carolina. Again, originally, it was part of Shaw University in Raleigh. We know that Shaw is a private school, and we're only talking about the state institutions today. And then, of course, it was moved. There was an intense interest in a number of places, including Durham, to attract North Carolina A&T. But the community here in Greensboro really pooled their resources together. And the community used to be called Warnersville. It was one of the urban renewal communities that were destroyed. But the people of Warnersville basically pooled their resources together to purchase the land to bring the university here to Greensboro. And so it's, again, a university that focuses on agricultural and at the time mechanical, the mechanical arts, and of course now, but was founded with all of the disciplines, including history and English, but liberal arts as well as agricultural and mechanical. So again, today we are the largest HBCU in the nation. We have well over or slightly over 12,000 students. We have graduate programs, MA programs, and PhD programs. And so, yeah, that's the general gist of our school. And again, it was one of a number of HBCUs that are land grant schools that were established after that act in 1890. And our school was established in 1891.
Thank you. Dr. Benson.
Good afternoon. Yeah, this is also interesting, and we'll be able to use all of this information in our classes. Winston-Salem State started, we actually competed with A&T for that land grant, but A&T won. They had, the citizens of Greensboro have raised a lot more money. So Simon Green Atkins, who was a good friend of Dr. Shepherd, he started Slater Institute with a one-room school and 25 students. And then in 1925, Slater became Winston-Salem Teachers College. And a lot of people who grew up in North Carolina grew up calling Winston-Salem State TC. And I guess Elizabeth City was also called TC. But anyway, a teachers college. And then, of course, in 1972, the North Carolina General Assembly combined these five historical Black institutions and historical white institutions to make one consolidated University of North Carolina system. So there was a lot of protests because people did not understand what would happen to the Board of Trustees at these colleges as we came under the umbrella of the Board of Governors. But things have worked out relatively well. Not completely well, but relatively well. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you very much. So North Carolina Central University was part of a very robust African American community here in Durham. And I think to appreciate its founding, you kind of have to understand a little bit about that context, because historically, the period in which we were founded in 1910 was a period it was very difficult for African Americans. But Durham was somewhat of a contradiction. We had the establishment of North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company in 1898, the Mechanics at Farmers Bank, Lincoln Hospital, in 1901, Mechanics at Farmers Bank in 1907, and then North Carolina Central in 1910. And leading the charge, like Dr. Smallwood pointed out, was a graduate of Shaw University, and that was Dr. James Edward Shepard, who had earned a degree in pharmacy there in 1895, and then come to Durham and set up shop in Durham in a community again that was already on the move. And many people were coming to Durham during that period because of the tobacco industry and opportunity for jobs. And unlike so many other areas in the South, Durham was a place where African Americans were able to establish institutions to support our community. And those communities not only survived, but they ended up thriving. So North Carolina Central University came into existence as an institution really to train ministers. Shepard had worked for the International Sunday School Association and could see the need for that. It's like all of the institutions, many, I should say, of our HBCUs, it struggled starting out to raise funding, and it's gone through several different iterations. Significant hurdles were cleared in 1915 when it went from being the National Religious Training School, initially the National Religious Training School in Chautauqua, but it changed in 1915 to the National Religious Training School. In 23, the state took it on, and we became a normal school, the Durham State Normal School. And again, we've gone through a number of iterations. 1925, we become a liberal arts college. And then 1969, we become North Carolina Central University. So a lot of changes, a lot that we could talk about during that time, but I know you want us to keep this relatively short.
Well, I was enjoying it. I was not going to stop you. It was good. But I am also interested. I'm glad that we have these particular schools because of the fact that 3 of them did start off as private schools and became public. And so I think this is kind of like talking about both in one setting. And I appreciate y'all referring back to Shaw and the fact that you were started as private schools. So I think Jerry has another question for you.
Are we starting with Fayetteville State again? Okay. What are a few significant accomplishments of graduates and administrators of your university?
I mean, we can't talk about Fayetteville State without talking about Ambassador E.E. Smith, who led the school, Charles Chestnut, one of the first prominent novelists, Fayetteville State alumni, many of whom continue to serve in our armed forces, really go all around the world. And so, one of the great things about this sort of new era of technology is that we're also an online and adult education school where over 43% of our students are over the age of 25. We have lots of online degree completion programs. And so what we see every day is our alumni joining federal agencies, starting up businesses, and really tapping into that rich legacy established by our early students who then turned into principals, who then turned into chief executives, building up these institutions.
Dr. Tarik.
All right, so Elizabeth City State University has always really been a teacher's college, teacher's university. I think that's really part of the legacy that we have built upon since 1891. We too also have an aviation program. So we have students that are involved in aviation management, that of training with drones. And it's really one of our most popular programs, as well as the interdisciplinary program. And just like Fayetteville State, We have a large population that are now outside of Elizabeth City, that are in the surrounding counties because of the articulation agreements we have with the community colleges. So that has really helped our enrollment, and then broadening out the space of Elizabeth City beyond the boundaries that we're in. The mayor of Elizabeth City graduated from here, and Elizabeth City now, from the RTC program, have just achieved their first general. So I think those are some of the greater achievements that I can actually tell you about, because I'm not native to here, and that's really what Dr. Bowman was going to kind of do, is the specifics of Elizabeth City, and I was going to do more of the global, and I would tell you about the global a little later. But I would say that we are the most far eastern HBCU in North Carolina, and unless you're going to go to the universities that's closer to us, which will be on the Virginia side, we serve a big gap in terms of education, not just for Black students now, but pretty much for the citizens of the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, and I do like the fact that you serve those rural counties in northeastern North Carolina. But before we get to Dr. Smallwood, I forgot to announce to the audience, if you have any questions or comments, please type them in your chat, and we will get to them in a little bit. So thank you now, Dr. Smallwood. All right, I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So for A&T, there's a host of individuals who are, well-known alums of our university. And of course, the one I think that would jump out, the furthest would be Jesse Jackson. And if you know about his movement and his run for the presidency, the Democratic nomination for the presidency, and the push movement, and all the things that he's been involved with. So certainly a national, international leader, well-known, and all Aggies, of course, are familiar with him, and I think most people are as well. The next one would be, and again, these are not in any order because there's so many outstanding graduates of A&T, but Henry Fry, who was the first African-American Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. And so I think it's, you must, talk about him and the role that he played in shaping North Carolina. And then the other, because I won't take much time, is Elma Adams, who's currently representative in Congress, and that represents our district. So she is a proud A&T alum. But numerous alums, Regan, Michael Regan, who has just been appointed to the EPA in the Biden administration, and on and on. So a number of Aggies who are doing great things, for North Carolinians as well as for the country.
Thank you. Dr. Benson.
Yes, there are quite a few Rams that we could talk about, but today I just want to talk about two, just in the interest of time. And the first Rams that I'd like to talk about would be the student athletes that were prepared by Clarence Big House Gaines, Hall of Fame basketball coach. And as many of you know, when he got to Winston-Salem State, he was the basketball coach, the football coach, the athletic director, and just about everything else. And he went to New York and recruited Earl the Pearl Monroe to come down and play for the Rams in the early 1960s. And the key thing that we want to note there is Earl the Pearl Monroe was so fascinating, we had to move the basketball games from the campus to Lawrence Joel Coliseum. And because in defiance of segregation, Black and white fans wanted to see Earl of Pearl Monroe. And in his senior year, he averaged 41 points. So he got his foundation at Winston-Salem State before going on to the NBA. And last Sunday, he was listed as one of the top 75 basketball players of all time. Now, having said that, you might not realize that ESPN analyst Stephen A. Smith is a graduate of Winston-Salem State. of course, he's outspoken, and he was outspoken as a student. And so after Big House benched him, he wrote an essay saying that Big House, it was time for him to retire. So he's always been opinionated and outspoken. But we all want to acknowledge, I can remember watching a professional football game and seeing an athlete from Elizabeth City. So we all have these people in our repertoire. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about Lozelle DeLute. She finished Winston-Salem State with a degree in elementary ed in the 1950s. And then she started teaching, and then she became a principal. And then she went on and got her master's and a doctorate in education. But the key thing to know about her is that she and her husband made 132 loans. They had this big idea. They wanted to own a McDonald's franchise in Delaware. And before she retired, she owned 3 McDonald's franchises. So when we're talking about these students and their graduates, we have to also remember that we have transferable skills. You know, she basically used the methodology that she had learned as an education major to train her McDonald's staff in customer service, you know. And so a lot of things that she learned at TC, she was able to transfer as she became interested in business. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson. You know you're muted.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. You know, it's a slippery slope, this thing that you're asking, right? Because there's so many outstanding Eagles that we could talk about. What I'm going to do is just run through a few, and I'm going to start sort of with a shameless plug for an exhibit that Dr. Smallwood and I have created on the football rivalry between A&T and North Carolina Central. That's now at the Museum of Greensboro History Museum and the Museum of Durham History, and it covers the whole rivalry. And this year is the 100th year of that rivalry. So I'm going to start with Wilson Bashan Eagleson, who was the first the first head coach in that rivalry between the two schools. Eagleson was born in Bloomington, Indiana, and he married Frances Marshall Eagleson, who ended up being a registrar at North Carolina Central for many, many years. We named a dorm in honor of her, and they have a son named after the dad who became a Tuskegee Airman, Wilson Bashan Eagleson. Then you have Lewis Austin, who was the owner and editor of the Carolina Times, really, really important newspaper located in Durham. And he was someone who spoke on questions and issues of race, very articulate in that regard, very outspoken. Lewis Austin. Then you can't talk about sports in North Carolina Central without talking about Herman Harry Riddick, the pride of Gates County, who was our winningest football coach. Outstanding coach at all levels, coached at Durham's Black High School, Hillside, went 82-5-3 as a high school coach, won multiple CIAA titles and a national championship. As a basketball coach, you have Alexander Rivera, Alec Rivera, who was the founder of our news bureau at North Carolina College, came in 1939, became an internationally recognized photographer and photojournalist. Covered sports and civil rights and so many other things for us. You have Herman Ike Boone, the famous high school coach. If you remember the Titans, Herman Boone is also an Eagle. You have Henry McKinley Mishaw, former senator and the longest serving state representative in North Carolina. H.M. Mickey Mishaw is a double Eagle, undergrad and law school. You have Sleepy Sam Jones, who won 10 NBA titles with the Boston Celtics as a shooting guard, is in the NBA Hall of Fame. You have Big John Baker, who becomes the first sheriff, African-American sheriff in Wake County, but before that, He had been a standout football player at Legan High School in Raleigh, and then at North Carolina College, and then for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You have the Honorable G.K. Butterfield, who's the congressman for the 1st Congressional District of North Carolina and former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice. You have Ernie Barnes, the famous artist, for those people out there in podcast land. If you've ever seen the show Good Times, the artwork that's associated with that was created by an Eagle. Ernest Barnes was also an outstanding football player for North Carolina College and a homeboy, as it were. You have Larry Black, who was Olympic gold medal winner from North Carolina College. In the 1972 Olympics, he won gold in the 4x1 and the silver in the 200 meters. You have Jeannie Hopkins Lucas, who was the first African-American woman state senator in North Carolina. Ivan Dixon, who was known, for those of us of a certain age will remember him as the African-American actor on the television series Hogan's Heroes. And more recently, you have Christy Jones, who is currently the Chief of Staff for the Office of the Governor of the State of North Carolina. And then Lavelle Moten, who is our current head basketball coach, and all he does is win. And I would be remiss if I did not mention Dr. Donna Benson, who, even though she went to UNCG, is actually a history maker herself. So she has been very humble about that, but she is the first African-American woman to lead one of these UNC system schools. So,
all right, thank you. And I'm not rushing you because you got good information, but Dr. Tarik wants to say something. And then we have a lot of questions in the audience that we got to get to. So,
yes, sir. I also think it's important for our students and the broader audience to know that right now that the CIAA is going on, and that the CIAA was founded in 1912 with Shaw University being one of the founding members. It's one of the oldest Black athletic conferences here in the country, and obviously still continuing. But I think something that people really should also know, like I'm a Tar Heel fan, right? So I come in with the personality of Michael Jordan when I was 10 years old, and I just turned 50 last Tuesday. So I'm happy about that, right? But what people really don't know is that as good of a coach that Dean Smith was, he attended a lot of Clarence Big Hall Gaines camps, and he learned the four corners from Clarence Big Hall Gaines. Billy Packard, maybe about 10 years ago or so, actually said it on the broadcast, and people was actually shocked. And that really brought him back to the forefront. And it actually led people to who we call the ambassador of Black basketball, John McClendon, who actually helped to mentor Clarence Big Hall Gaines and a lot of other coaches throughout the CIAA. So if you look at Black college sports, many of our heroes and superstars came from historically Black colleges and universities. A lot of people like to obviously call out Eddie Robinson, but we had Coach Bobby Vaughn, who just passed away last year. So when you look at the CIAA, you're looking at a powerhouse conference. Because imagine if all of these big sports teams, these players on these teams, were still in the CIAA today. And we know how competitive that Division II basketball was before they created all these Division I basketball conferences. Division II basketball was a place to watch because we know people like Ben Wallace and Rick Mahorn from Hampton Institute at the time, and it is so many others, AJ English from Virginia Union. We know that these are the players that the basketball community, the scouts, came out to see.
Okay, thank you. Now I do need to make an announcement for the audience that thinks this will end at 2:30 because it is 2:29. So we are going to go up to 2:50 just like it was a class, and I'm glad all the panelists agreed to stay. So we were going to do a little piece, but we don't have time to do any entertainment right now. We're going to go right to the questions from the audience. Okay. Dr. Chris Roddenberry. Do you want to, and he's a psychology professor at Wake Tech. Do you want to read that one, Jerry?
Yeah, Chris Roddenberry says, were African American students allowed in colleges before Plessy versus Ferguson?
And anybody can answer that.
Well, I'll start by saying if he means specifically in the South, then that's going to be you get a different answer if you're talking specifically about the South. But if you're talking about schools outside of the South, then that answer might be different. So it depends. He has to kind of qualify the question, but it depends on where you are, because there are some predominantly white universities in the Midwest and in the Northeast that did allow African American students to attend.
I think how I would address that real quick is just simply to say that we wanted education, and that it was a real challenge for us to be educated, right? And that's why forums like this are so important, when we can discuss the founding of the HBCUs, because that's what called these institutions into existence. And while I'm on that, I want to flip that and say that HBCUs, even though we carry that designation, have always accepted anyone who wanted to go to those schools. So we have never had a policy that excluded anyone from attending them.
Thank you. Next, do not rain Fayyad. I'm not sure I got that right. Go.
She says, what is an advantage of attending an HBCU?
This is Dr. Benson. I have a slide on that. And the other thing you want to remember is that there were 2 HBCUs that were founded before the Civil War. So they were not in the South, but and then all of these institutions, basically 3 of them predate Plessy. So there's been a large push for African American education for a long, long time. But I want to share a couple of things about the value of the HBCUs, and I'm going to ask my colleagues to help me with this, because let's see here if I can find it.
Are you getting ready to share your screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I want to just basically talk about the fact of the value of an HBCU, and especially with regard to research. And one of the things that you want to remember is that these faculty, students, alumni, and partners are grounded in certain research methodologies. One is community-based research. So we have lots of faculty members and students who are going out and basically addressing issues. We have a mobile unit from the nursing program at Winston-Salem State that goes out into the community and helps people with now mental health as well, various health. So community-based research. The other thing is that if you looked at a profile, we're also doing health disparities research. Another thing is that we're looking at research that focuses on effective teaching and learning for diverse populations. And so go back to TC, go back to Fayetteville State, go back to Winston-Salem State, North Carolina A&T, and Central, and the production of teachers and principals and college presidents for the public schools. And the other thing we want to do is that we want to acknowledge the fact that these schools have research that focuses on creative expression and the fine arts, including, just think about these wonderful choirs, Charles Gilchrist at North Carolina Central, the marching bands, the jazz ensembles, the hip hop summits, and outstanding theater festivals. And another thing we want to see, and it's the evolving interest in business and entrepreneurial research, and then leadership in social justice research. So I don't know what the doctoral students at North Carolina A&T are doing in the field of engineering. So I guess we probably could add nanotechnology and some of the technology and engineering research as well. But this is just a picture of Big House Gaines, and of course he was quite knowledgeable. He finished Morgan with a degree in chemistry, Earl of Pearl Monroe and Stephen A. Smith, who's on the TV now. This is Dr. DeLutz. She spoke in 2005 when we opened up Winston-Salem Preparatory Academy with a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Thurgood Marshall Foundation, not the plantation. And so then finally, somebody mentioned, Dr. Johnson mentioned Alex Rivera, and he took this picture. This is the 1992 CIAA tournament in Richmond. And when we went there, Doug Wilder was the governor of Virginia. So he invited everybody over to the governor's mansion. And so we had a wonderful time there. But this is when I was the interim chancellor of North Carolina Central University. And you want to remember that Central and A&T used to both be in the CIAA. So again, this is the value. It's different types of research. So you basically would not necessarily have the same number of highly trained faculty members doing this community-based social justice, healthcare disparity research that we have going on at these HBCUs. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say congratulations for putting on that. I love it. And for the students that are doing this for class, you wouldn't have gotten a better lecture series with these scholars. It's full of information. It will be on YouTube, so you can use it later and you can share it. But thank you. And I know other people have responses. I just want to let you know we do have a lot more questions in the chat, but I'm going to let you go ahead and respond, but please be brief, whoever wants to.
Well, I have to add this part because in terms of the student's question, if you look at North Carolina A&T, we said we're the largest HBCU in the country, but in the UNC system, of the 17 campuses in the UNC system, in terms of research dollars that are generated in the millions, we're number 3. The only 2 institutions ahead of us are Chapel Hill and NC State. If you talk about the productivity of our graduates, it must be stated, just this year we went down to number 2, but our graduates were number 1 in terms of salaries, highest paid graduates of the UNC system. So it's important to understand that you have that opportunity to network, with alums and with other students who are like-minded, and you get a great education and get the opportunity, as Dr. Benson has so eloquently laid out, to do research and work with faculty members and do things that you may not be able to do at other institutions.
I'm not cutting anybody off. If anybody else wants to add, please do so.
Well, I would say that, North Carolina Central University has a long tradition of producing outstanding graduates, and that hasn't changed today at all. And another element that I think rings true for all of these institutions is that for young people, you're coming into a family environment and you're coming to a place where people really want to see you succeed. And I really mean that. They're committed to your success. So you will not come in and be like a number or something like that. It is, I'm going to borrow a statement from another institution. They say, at this institution, everybody's someone. And I think that just rings true for the HBCU experience. And I would encourage you to get out and to visit the institution so that you can get a feel for what they're like. Each one has its own heartbeat, its own pulse. And the way to really experience that and to appreciate it is to get out there and to experience that. But absolutely, I think we have questions coming up, but we can talk about all that we have to offer in Durham, but we'd love to have you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And as a staff person at Wake Tech, we do have to be more intentional, directing students to all of the great opportunities that exist at the HBCUs. We have articulation agreements with all of you, but with the UNC system, but we have specific articulation agreements with A&T, Winston-Salem, even Elizabeth City. We just did one with your aviation program. And Dr. Johnson, we do it with criminal justice, and with Fayetteville State is several. So I don't think students really understand. And I'm going to be nice to Elizabeth City and say their tuition is only $500, and that's also important. So we're ready for some more questions. All right, Dr. Chris O'Riordan Ajah, and he is the head of Wake Tech's Associate of Engineering program. Go ahead, Jerry.
All right, Dr. Chris says, great cast, great information, and rich history of HBCUs. Are there any articulation agreements among all of your schools? If so, what programs and how do you all support each other, if any?
Well, I cannot state specifically all of the articulation agreements, but I will say it is a point of emphasis from the chancellor as well as our dean for the programs to create as many articulation agreements as possible. I do know that we're near Totwater Community College in Portsmouth, Virginia, which has several campuses within the Hampton Roads area, and we get a lot of students who transfer from the Hampton Roads area into Elizabeth City State University, as well as other schools as well. We certainly, as a university, we don't have a very large graduate program, so we are always looking to create these various pipelines to other HBCUs. So far, North Carolina Central probably has been our most active pipeline of students leaving here and going there and continuing their degrees in history, particularly those who have special interest in public history. So I teach the public history courses here, and public history courses are so specialized that they're really hard to find in terms of a degree program, and North Carolina Central offer our students that along with their law school.
And I'll just say very quickly, Ajane Willis, who is a prime example of that, she's gone from Elizabeth City through our program and is now at the University of Houston working on a PhD and doing quite well. So that's an example of that. Excellent, Dr. Latif Tarik.
Tarik, does anybody else?
I'll just note briefly that Fayetteville State has several articulation agreements with Wake specifically, and that we also have an online degree completion program in history that we have a good number of students in. About half of our history majors are currently in that online degree completion program.
Yeah.
And we're going to become an NC Promise school starting in fall.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Dr. Benson. We have had vibrant articulation agreements with many of the community colleges, especially in regards to nursing. And so you can start, do a joint program now with Winston-Salem State's nursing program. The passing rate is 96%. I just wanted to add. But at any rate, with Winston-Salem State's nursing program. And so a lot of them need to be updated. But we're in the process now of updating justice studies. Dr. Denise Nation, and we've, again, with this social justice research, the faculty at Winston-Salem State have helped 2 men who were incarcerated get exonerated and freed. And the most recent was Dr. Nation and Dr. Jack Monell helped Ronnie Long get out of jail. He had been in there 44 years for a wrongful conviction. So the types of research questions that we answer are very, very important. But yes, we love articulation agreements, and we want to make the transition as seamless as possible.
Thank you. Dr. Smallwood, no?
Well, just to add, you already mentioned the ones we have with Wake, but certainly any community college students can transfer, with a 2-year associate's degree into, or even before that, but can transfer into A&T, and I think all of our campuses. So we have a natural association with community colleges, and so, but yes, we do have a number, and I can't name all of the agreements that we have. And we do also try to support our, not just the HBCUs, but we try to send students on for PhDs as well. I think Dr. Johnson knows we've been sending a number of students to Central as well in history, and we've done a number of projects together. But certainly there are a number of agreements that exist for engineering and for the other programs. There are none specifically for history, but we certainly will take transfer students from 2-year institutions here in our department.
And I know that North Carolina Central is actively seeking to create these types of ties. And what I will comment on, and then there might be another question, is that the students that I have had the privilege of teaching that have come out of our community college system have done extremely well. So I think that should be encouraging for anyone who's out there listening.
All right. And before we get to an audience question, we're going to ask one that we have. And for the audience and for you, you can go back and get these answers. And if you don't get your answer, you're going to be able to contact these people and get an answer, because we're going to give up some contact information. All right, Jerry, what's the next question?
What is the current focus of your university in relation to program offerings and interfacing with the community?
I'll go briefly, and then I do have to head out, and I apologize for heading out. But a lot of it is, just helping these partway home students, folks who maybe started school a while back and still need to finish their degree, helping folks get the rest of the way home, finishing it up, those 4 years, being able to move forward in their careers. We really are placing a great emphasis on online education, on adult education, and on military affiliated, both people who are currently active duty, but also their family members and veterans as well, with new scholarships that we just announced for military affiliated students, and giving back to the community in that way.
I'm going to answer this. I think one of the things that Elizabeth City State University is doing very well in the 4 years that I've been here, and that is being able to really upgrade the infrastructure of the university. And if a lot of us looking at the couple weeks ago, the C-SPAN subcommittee on HBCUs, we understand how a lot of money don't always get to HBCUs. So when students come visit, sometimes the campus may not look as appealing as other places. But now when you come here, I mean, we have a lot of things being planned. We have a major road that actually intersect between our campus and some student residence halls. So we're going to have an overpass that's being built. We have various new buildings that are being built on the campus, and we have a lot of room for expansion. Currently, I'm a part of the Social Justice Task Force that's just been formed. So we're beginning to do social justice research, and we want it to be very student-led type organization, student-led programming where we direct the students in a way that we can go back and look at the ways that Ella Baker did it, right? Allow the students to be able to determine the type of projects and programs and how they want to engage the community. So I think being facility focused will really help us to bring the students in. Our library has been renovated. I mean, it's really beautiful. You have private, quiet space, green space, spaces to recharge, because we all have all of these electronic gadgets now. So I think in that way, that is really allowing the community to see that we're growing and that we want them to grow with us.
Thank you very much. And we're getting ready to end, audience, in about 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask Dr. Smallwood and Dr. Benson and Dr. Johnson. I know that you have a lot to say, but if you can be a little bit, like 30 seconds to a minute. And then I want you to all just give your contact information, and we will be over, and we might have to bring you back and do a part 2. So don't think that we won't do that. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Smallwood.
Okay, just to be brief with ours, obviously we were a center for COVID vaccinations. We used our alumni center here on campus to vaccinate as many people in the community as would come and take advantage of that. Dean Goldie Bird, who's an A&T alum and was dean of the College of Arts and Sciences here at A&T before going to Wake Forest, established an Alzheimer's Institute in which we're working with the Black community, which we're suffering from that disease, and very engaged in the community to help caregivers and work with people. And then, of course, the beloved community center. If you know about, ever heard of the Greensboro Massacre and the individuals that were killed here in Greensboro, that center works with them, and we have students that are engaged in helping to do community research and preserve community histories. So we stay engaged in our community. We care very much about Greensboro and the Greensboro community, and I'm being long, but we are essential to the community. The community loves A&T because we employ people, whether they're working in the cafeteria or keeping the grounds, and we see them as Aggies too. So we have a community in which people, we care about the people in our community.
Thank you. Dr. Benson.
Yes, I just can't stress enough the importance of graduate training as nurse practitioners and nursing researchers, allied health, and occupational doctoral students nationally recognized, and of course, that's social justice. But things are going well, and we just want to continue to move forward. There was a Pan-Africanist, and I'll conclude with this, whose name was Amilcar Cabral, and he said, "Claim no easy victories." And we basically want to applaud the fact that these institutions have been alive and well, for the most part, for more than 100 years. I cannot think about Fort Bragg without thinking about Fayetteville State and how we have helped so many of those soldiers before they get deployed to get degrees. And so each one of these institutions is a flagship, and we applaud our partnerships with the private schools. You heard that a lot of our faculty members were educated at the historical Black private schools, Shaw's, St. Aug, Johnson C. Smith, Barbara Scotia, and Bennett. These have been collaborations along with us. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson.
So at North Carolina Central, I'll take the course that Dr. Tarik did and say that you really have to see how much it has grown just over the last few years. The infrastructure development there is awesome. The dorms are just awesome. Classroom upgrades all over the campus. It is amazing how much the institution has changed. So much to offer in so many different programs, whether you're talking about in the sciences, in our history program, which is routinely top 5 in the country for producing African-American graduates. And I would say probably top 5 for producing those who go on to get the PhD in history also. So many programs we could talk about. I know we're pretty much out of time now, but right. Thank you so much, Michael, and let's do a part 2, man.
We're going to do part 2, and we're going to go backwards this time. So, Dr. Johnson, you can go
about that. I appreciate that.
Just give your name and contact information for anybody who wants to get in touch. There you go. That's Dr. Johnson, North Carolina Central. Dr. Benson, your contact information. There you go. Dr. Donna J. Benson, Winston-Salem State. All right, Dr. Smallwood. Do we have your information? There you go. Dr. Arwin Smallwood, A&T, North Carolina A&T. Elizabeth City. Dr. Tarik. Your contact information. There we go. Dr. Latif Tarik, Elizabeth City State University, and Dr. Tabor. You started first, but you ended last, okay? Dr. Robert Tabor, you at Fayetteville State University. I thank all of you, and I don't want you to think that we won't be working with our history department, and many of you know our history department chair, Dr. Malone, and we're going to see if we can get each of you to come to classes, because each of you can do a whole class. You can do a whole week of classes. So we really appreciate everybody for coming, and we hate to say goodbye so very suddenly, but we have to. So please say goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Hello, this is Michael Eure, and I'd like to invite you to the Michael Eure Show, featuring student hosts and very special guests talking about a variety of interesting topics. You can find us on the Eagle Stream YouTube channel.